Good morning, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, Gary? Hope you had a good Fourth, buddy.
Man, I did. I got to play some golf, which is always good. Don't get to do it often. Hey, listen, we're going to get into some Falcons discussion in the second segment, but I'm going to kick it off with college football. Obviously, we're going to get to Alabama, but I was holding this for you because I know people think coaches are paranoid, but Jake Fromm is another example of why they are. Now, it's his non-throwing hand. It looks like he's going to be okay, but on Monday at Lake Burton, he had a little boating mishap, and it just goes to show you why coaches are the way they are. What if that had been his throwing hand? What if it had been worse? I mean, in the summer, coaches just sit on pins and needles worrying about their players, don't they, Mike?
Yeah, no, they do. And this is just the latest in a string of incidents like this, isn't it? I mean, I think it was last year, 2 years ago. I think Tony Michelle had a four-wheeler accident. Maybe that was Nick Chubb. I mean, it just every year something like this seems to come out, and it's not football related, and it's just people trying to live their lives. And I go back and forth in discussion with myself, Gary. It's like, hey, listen, I've been a college football player. I've been one of those guys that wanted to stay safe, but at the same time, you are a college kid. You are in your early 20s, and you do want to live life and have a good time. So you have to be able to find that balance, and coaches understand that, so they allow it to happen. Say, hey, go out on the lake, have a lot of fun. Just be careful, and this is just definitely the downside of what could possibly happen in some of these crazy situations over some of these summer holidays. It just it's unfortunate for him, but I have no doubt that he'll be back better than ever by the time that ball kicks off.
Yeah, you're right. It's a balancing act. I mean, these are 19, 20-year-old kids. They want to have fun during the summer. They want to do what other students are able to do, but sometimes they can't, and I know a lot of coaches, tell me, hey, don't get on a motorcycle, don't get on a four-wheeler, just really be careful because it's bad enough that you get hurt in a game, but that's part of playing college football. But it drives coaches crazy when guys get hurt in a non-football related activity, even something like playing basketball, which guys love to do. I know a lot of coaches tell especially their quarterbacks and wide receivers, their skill people, listen, lay off the basketball during the summer.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. And listen, if you're jumping up and down playing basketball, rolling an ankle, tweaking a knee, stuff like that's going to happen. I think it's crazy to, and this happens in all sports too. I mean, we saw that this year with, last year, I think when Madison Bumgarner over the San Francisco Giants gets injured in an accident on his own. And so it's like you said, these are young kids and, just trying to enjoy life. I mean, heck, I wish I was boating up at Lake Burton. I don't know about you, but it sounds like a pretty good time. So, you got to find your way. And, coaches will tell you, hey, if you want to be special, you have to act in a special way. And make sure you're being careful in the things you're doing and kind of watching yourself. But it's just it's hard to avoid. And I think it's crazy that it happens, of all people in the SEC right now, it happens to a guy like Jake Fromm, who many are touting, the AL.com did the piece, many are touting as possibly the MVP of the SEC next year. It's interesting that it happened to him at this point in time.
Yeah, a lot of pro athletes, in fact, as you know, have clauses in their contracts where they can't participate in certain off-season activities, mainly sports related. Hey, I want to get into the Alabama quarterback situation. I've tried not to talk about it much, but it just is not going to go away. And earlier this week, Scott Hunter was on Wimp and Barry's Inside the Locker Room program, and he predicted that Jalen Hurts would be the starter against Louisville. He didn't say that Jalen Hurts was better. He didn't say that would necessarily be the long-term situation, but he said he felt like in the first game, Jalen Hurts would start that game at quarterback. And then Wimp Sanderson's been saying that all along. And, of course, the fans are just in an uproar. I want to get your opinion as a former player because it just looks to me, and I know we both love Tua Tagovailoa. We both love Jalen Hurts. But it seems like the fans have made up their mind. 99.9% of the fans want Tua Tagovailoa as a starting quarterback at Alabama. They can't even have a concept of why anybody would want Jalen Hurts to be the starter, despite, his numbers, his stats, over 6,000 total yards in 2 years, all the victories, only 2 losses as a starter. My question is this, though, Mike. You talk to fans, it's just almost unanimous they want Tua. You talk to coaches, you talk to former players, not so fast. It's just viewed differently, I think. And I'm not predicting right now who's going to be the starter. I haven't made that prediction yet. I'm holding off. But I think Nick Saban will do what he thinks is best for the football team. But why do you think coaches, particularly, and former players view this quarterback race between Tua and Jalen not as one-sided as the fans do?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think from a fan perspective, this is a perfect storm. I mean, you and I have talked about it before. most popular guy in the locker room is always going to be the backup quarterback. And let's add to that the fact that he is a highly touted backup quarterback, and the fact that he has a last name like Tongo Vailoa, which adds even more suspense. And then he comes in and brings the team back to win a national title game. It's like the most perfect storm of quarterback controversies of all time in college football. I mean, I can't think of a better scenario for a guy getting hyped up than to be able to, kind of check off all those categories. And I think the reason I, as a former player, and I think, you added to it the coaches and guys like Scott Hunter that talk about this, there's just so many different, ways to win over a football team. There's so many different ways to win a football game. What Tua can do, I don't think there's any doubt about it. I don't think anybody's making the argument Tua is not a better passer than Jalen, right? I mean, he has a live arm, his accuracy, his anticipation that he showed off in the national title game. But there's a lot more facets to that. Jalen has been able to keep his interception numbers so low. I mean, it's the lowest interception number in the SEC over the last couple of years. But I look at Tua, and listen, I was at the Tennessee game when he throws the pick six there in the second half. I saw the interception there in the Georgia game. I've seen some of the downsides of Tua Tagovailoa. Listen, if he doesn't throw the pass on 2nd and 26, we might still be talking about him taking a 16-yard sack there on first down in overtime. And so it's just not that simple. Jalen does things that you can't really calculate as far as arm talent, but he does them with his legs, and he does them with his mind, and he does them with his maturity, and he does them with his leadership. And so while I think that no doubt you look at Tua and you look at his arm strength and you look at everything he can do through the air, you hope that he is the player that everybody makes him out to be. But Jalen, other than his arm, has crossed off so many things off the list. He has so many check marks of what you want in a quarterback, be it poise, like I said, be it leadership, that as a former player, you look at it and say, boy, you know what? I'd love to go in the huddle with that guy. I'd love to have a guy like Jalen Hurts behind me, especially as an offensive lineman. I think that he makes them look so much better. And so I think that's just the tendency. If fans look at it and say, oh, boy, look what he can do with his arm. Look what Tua can do. He can throw the ball a million miles, and, he can hit guys in stride. But Jalen brings a lot of other things to that huddle that I think can be valued by Nick Saban and staff. And I think that's why I kind of pull the reins back just a little bit on all this Tua Heisman hype and everything else that's come out this spring.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think you just have to kind of wait and see. And there's no doubt why the fans, many fans, I shouldn't say all the fans, when you want a certain player, the problem I have with it, Mike, and what's disappointing is if you think Tua's better, more power to you. I mean, absolutely pull for Tua to be the starter, acknowledge the incredible things he's done. But I get annoyed. I'm not going to lie to you. And it happens with fans and even on talk radio. When you listen to some people, you would think Jalen Hurts could not tie his shoes. And the fact of the matter is, A.J. McCarron is the all-time leader in total offense at Alabama, over 8,000 yards. Jalen's got nearly 7,000 in 2 seasons. If he were to play 2 more seasons as a starter, he would be over 12, probably 13,000 total yards. He's done a lot of good things. It isn't just like he's been out there handing the ball off every play. He won a lot of games, and he made a lot of plays. In fact, Mike, if you look back at that 2016 season, he carried that team, I thought, for a while early in the season offensively. I mean, the guy can play, and I get disappointed when people don't want to give. If you pull for Tua, that's fine, but don't want to give Jalen any credit. And the guy has done some marvelous things, first as a true freshman and then as a true sophomore quarterback for Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's one thing, too, and I don't see it a ton from Alabama fans. I think that most Alabama fans have a lot of love for Jalen and a lot of love for everything he's been able to do with that program. But to me, what really stinks about it is we're still over there doing SEC Country Live. We have to hear from fans on a daily basis of other programs, be it Auburn, be it LSU, be it possibly Texas A&M, and say, you know what, Jalen stinks. He's no good. He can't do this. He can't do that. But they haven't watched him week in and week out. They haven't watched the poise and maturity and leadership he's brought to that football team and the incredible games that he's been able to play through as a starting quarterback. It's not just when you get on the national scale, or it's not just when he's playing your team on some random Saturday in the fall. Being able to watch him mature and being able to watch him persevere and watch games like the comeback against Mississippi State or, the comeback a couple of years ago down in Baton Rouge. And it's one of those things where he has value. He has a lot of love given his way from Alabama fans. So it does. To me, it stinks when you look at a guy that's been so successful and you start to compare him to somebody else that doesn't have quite the track record, but you do want to throw Jalen under the bus. It doesn't make any sense to me either.
One final college football Alabama question before we get to the break, and then I want to come back and talk about why I think Julio Jones might be overplaying his hand and get your take on that. The schedules come under great scrutiny. A lot of the national analysts are bashing Alabama's schedule, and here's the thing. First of all, you open against a Louisville team that when this game was put together, Louisville was a national power and really has been good over a number of years. Now, they lose Lamar Jackson, suddenly they got a different team. That's not Alabama's fault. The conference schedule is what it is. But, Mike, something I think that gets failed to be pointed out, and everybody talks about Alabama as a double-digit favorite in every game. Well, they're Alabama. When you're the best team in the country, regardless of who you play, like Florida State last year, you're probably going to be favored. Most people are probably going to pick you to win those games. Alabama can't play Alabama. So regardless of who they play, they look like the better team. Now, I guess it would be nice if Alabama and Georgia were scheduled to play in the regular season this year. They are not. But I don't get all the schedule criticism. They scheduled a big-time non-conference game. They've got 8 conference games. Saban has been pushing for 9, so he wants even more. And then you've got to have a couple of powder puff games in there somewhere. Why all the criticism of the schedule, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to look at it for me, Gary. I mean, first of all, show me a team that has the right to complain about Alabama's schedule. I kind of got into this riff with some Oklahoma people over the Lincoln Riley comments a couple of days ago, and they started talking about Alabama's schedule. Listen, Oklahoma played Tulane and UTEP and Army, and I mean, they're not scheduling these teams because they're scared they're going to lose, right? I mean, this is not some kind of home and home schedule that some of these other teams are making. So the first thing I always point out is show me who your team plays. Show me who your team is playing throughout the year that makes it some kind of a tougher schedule than what Alabama's facing, especially anybody from the SEC East, name being Georgia, who obviously I live over here in Atlanta. Their schedule's terrible this year. Georgia has the worst schedule in the SEC when you look at who they're going to be matching up against. So I don't know why all the griping. The second thing for me is people do point out the point spreads from Las Vegas and say, boy, double-digit favorites in every game. That's not football coaches looking at it, right? Those are not game planners. Those are not people looking at it and saying, hey, these are going to be our issues, easy edge rushers. These are Vegas people that are trying to drum up people to bet money.
That's right, trying to get money on both sides. Exactly.
Exactly. They want to get this money kind of flowing through Vegas. They're not looking at it saying, hey, well, Bama's this much better than everybody. Hey, Bama's been so good over the last 10 years that we have to make the spreads this way if people are going to bet the opposite direction. And so, when people bring up this argument of double-digit favorites as far as the schedule goes, it's a loaded conversation. Bama is going to be that way because these are Vegas making these spreads, and they want people to bet on the game. So it's interesting to me that the points that come in and out of people talking about it, and it's frustrating as a Bama guy and as somebody who's suited up and played in some of those games. Yeah, we might be a double-digit favorite over LSU, might not be, but I guarantee you, going to play a game in Baton Rouge at nighttime in that stadium is not going to be easy. And so it drives me crazy when you hear people trying to mark it off the list like, oh, it's just another game. It's not. It's going to be a tough game. Auburn coming into Tuscaloosa is going to be a tough game. Absolutely,
Mike. And I'm with you. If it weren't Alabama, let's put any other team in the SEC or in the country, and you tell that team that in November, in the month of November, you've got to go to LSU and you've got Mississippi State and Auburn at home. A lot of teams will say, oh, my gosh, that's brutal. And it could be brutal. All 3 of those teams, LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn, have the potential to be very good. Yeah, it's Alabama bias. It's Alabama fatigue. It's Alabama hate. And I'm glad you brought up the Vegas thing, too. People have said, well, they're double-digit favorites. The reason they're double-digit favorites is because Vegas is trying to get a split. They're trying to get equal amount of action on both sides because that guarantees money to be made because of the fee put into bet. So if you make Alabama in some of these games a 6 or 7 point favorite, all the money is going to be on Alabama. It's going to be loaded up on one side. They've got to set those lines to get an equal amount of play. At least that's what they try to do, so the juice guarantees them victory. This Julio Jones situation, Mike, I've been thinking about it. Nobody loves Julio more than I do. I kind of have, touched on this with you a little bit in the past. I know he's great. I know he's in his prime. But listen, man, the more I look at this, he doesn't have any leverage here. I mean, other than he's a great player. I mean, he's basically, by holding out, trying to force the Falcons' hand, he's got 3 years left on a deal, Mike, period. He's got 3 years left on a contract that he just signed 2 years ago. He and Sexton should have known that that he was going to get passed. That's the nature of the beast. They could have signed a shorter deal, played the franchise tag game. They could have done some other things. I guess if the Falcons just want to make sure there's a lot of goodwill toward Julio, they could tear this thing up and renegotiate it. But he's not going to sit out the season. He can't afford to take that kind of hit. I mean, really, the more that I look at it, I think he's put the Falcons in a tough spot here. I mean, you signed the deal. You agreed to it. There were a lot of other ways that you could have handled that contract, could have made it shorter. As I said, could have played the franchise tag game. You could maybe get an understanding now that, hey, come play this season and we'll renegotiate once you have 2 years left on your deal. Where is the leverage for Julio Jones other than he is Julio Jones?
Well, that's kind of a tough question too, and I understand what you're saying. The leverage does come from the fact that he is Julio Jones. If you don't re-sign Julio Jones, and listen, Thomas Dimitroff, while he's done some incredible things as Atlanta's GM, he's also found himself on the hot seat a couple of different times in his career. So the last thing you want, your owner Arthur Blank really loves Julio Jones. He's impactful. He's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. The last thing you want to do if you're Thomas Dimitroff is find yourself in a situation where the best player on your football team is not on the football field for the fall. So that definitely is the leverage that Julio Jones holds. But
yeah, Mike, but Julio, if they don't renegotiate the deal, he's going to come in at some point. There's no way you're going to convince me he's going to sit out the season and bypass all that money.
I don't think sitting out the season is an issue. I think when you look at it, sitting out training camp, sitting out possibly 1 or 2 weeks of the season, that's what becomes the issue. It becomes when he shows up, not so much if he shows up, because I think they understand that Julio is going to show up, right? I mean, he's going to show up at some point, but how early do you get him in? How long are you without him during training camp? How good can your passing attack be under Steve Sarkisian if Julio Jones isn't going all the way through training camp? That's the question you begin to ask yourself in all these different scenarios. And listen, I think Julio is an incredible player, but I also will go there with you and saying I don't know that there's that much leverage to become the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. I think what Jimmy Sexton and company are looking for are a $2 or $3 million bump, in pay this year. I think the highest paid receiver makes 16, and Julio's scheduled to make 10. If they can find some middle ground, right? If they can find $2, $3, $4 million and put it somewhere in the middle, then I think Julio Jones and everybody really involved in the situation walks away happy, and you get Julio Jones back on the field with a little bit more jingle in his pocket.
So, yes or no? Do you think they renegotiate the deal?
I think they've got to. It's like you said, Julio doesn't have that much leverage, but when you look at Thomas Dimitroff, and you look at Arthur Blank, and you look at Falcons fans who have been so close to a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, I don't think you can do anything less than do whatever you can to get Julio on the field. You give him some type of raise. You probably don't make him the highest paid wide receiver, but I think you renegotiate at some point. I think they're willing to do that.
All right, running out of time. Calvin Ridley signed his deal this morning. The final Falcons rookie reports all that he's looked good. Obviously, he'll look better if Julio is lining up alongside him. But what are the early reviews on Calvin Ridley?
I think they've been great. Obviously, he's one of those guys who has a very, very high floor. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's going to be a good player and a productive player inside of the NFL system. Anytime you can sign him up and you get him on this rookie deal, listen, we talk about Julio Jones. Is he going to make 10 or 16 million? I think Calvin Ridley annually is expected to make somewhere in the $2.5 million range. So getting a player of his caliber, getting him under that rookie deal and getting him signed, getting him in some of these meeting rooms along with Matt Ryan and Mohamed Sanu and possibly Julio Jones at some point, I think he's going to have incredible output as a rookie. I really look for some great things just because he knows how to run routes, he knows how to find separation, and Matt Ryan's going to know how to get him the ball. 30
seconds, Mike. Any update as far as your professional opportunities?
Yeah, actually, we've signed an extension to stay on SEC Country Live, for the foreseeable future. So we're going to be doing SEC Country Live. Roll Tide Daily is still on a little bit of a hiatus right now, but we're still putting out great content, and the show's still continuing on SEC Country Live with myself and Brandon Adams. So really, really excited about that, and have a couple other irons in the fire that hopefully can update soon.
Well, that's awesome because that is a great show. Thanks so much, Mike.
All right, Gary. See you next week.